The stadium goes quiet. 80,000 people hold their breath. One player walks forward from the center circle, places the ball on the spot, and looks up at the goalkeeper. Everything that happens next will be decided in less than 3 seconds, and yet, what actually determines the outcome was decided long before that player ever touched the ball. You have watched penalty shootouts your entire life. You think you know what they are: a test of nerve, a coin flip dressed up as skill, a lottery. That is what the pundits say. That is what the losing managers say into the cameras afterward. But the science tells a completely different story. And once you understand what is really happening inside a penalty shootout, you will never watch one the same way again. Here is the first thing nobody tells you. The goalkeeper almost never saves a penalty because they read the kick correctly. They save it because the penalty taker told them where it was going, without saying a single word. In 2002, a Dutch researcher named Gerrit Savelsberg conducted one of the most important studies ever done on penalty kicks. He fitted professional goalkeepers with eye-tracking equipment and had them face penalty kicks from trained strikers. What he found was not that elite goalkeepers were better at reading the ball, they were better at reading the body. Specifically, they locked on to 3 signals before the ball was even struck: the angle of the standing foot, the drop of the kicking shoulder, and the direction of the hips at the moment of contact. By the time the ball left the boot, the goalkeeper already knew. Not always, but far more often than chance would predict. And here is where it gets strange. The penalty takers knew this too. They just could not stop it. Think about the last time you tried very hard not to think about something. The harder you pushed, the louder it got. That is not a personality flaw. That is a documented psychological phenomenon called ironic process theory, identified by psychologist Daniel Wegner in 1987. When your brain is instructed to suppress a thought, it creates a monitoring system to check whether that thought has been suppressed, and that monitoring system keeps the thought alive. When a striker walks up to the penalty spot telling himself, "Do not shoot to the keeper's right," some part of his body will lean toward the keeper's right. The suppression becomes a signal. This is why the most dangerous penalty taker in the world is not the one with the hardest shot. It is the one who has already decided, completely and irrevocably before they ever step onto the pitch. Antonín Panenka decided. In the 1976 European Championship final, Czechoslovakia and West Germany went to a shootout. Panenka stepped up for the decisive kick with the entire tournament on his feet, and he did something no professional player had ever done in a major tournament shootout before. He ran up, and then he chipped the ball softly down the middle. The West German goalkeeper, Sepp Maier, had already committed to his right. The ball floated into an empty net. The crowd could not process what they had just seen. It was not audacity, it was not gambling, it was the product of weeks of deliberate practice on his club's training ground, where Panenka had noticed that goalkeepers always moved early and that the center of the goal was therefore the most undefended space on the pitch. He did not suppress his nerves, he redirected them into a plan so complete that there was no room left for doubt. So why do most players not do what Panenka did? Because of something researchers call decision fatigue, and in a penalty shootout, it hits much earlier than anyone expects. A study published in the journal Current Biology in 2011 found that Israeli judges granted parole at dramatically different rates depending on the time of day. In the morning, after a break, the approval rate was around 65%. By late afternoon, it dropped close to 0. Not because the cases changed, because the judges' decision-making capacity had been slowly depleted. They defaulted to the safe status quo choice: deny, move on, conserve energy. Now apply that to a penalty shootout. By the time a 5th shooter steps up, they've spent 30 minutes watching teammates score and miss. They've been flooded with cortisol and adrenaline. Their prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain responsible for deliberate, planned thought, is partially offline. They're not choosing under pressure, they're surviving under pressure. And survival brains don't pick corners. Survival brains aim for where they remember being safe. This is why penalty data shows something remarkable. The most common spot for missed penalties in World Cup shootouts is not the post, it's the goalkeeper. Players don't miss the target wildly, they aim for where the goalkeeper is standing, because at a deep, automatic level, the goalkeeper represents the middle of the goal. Familiarity overrides strategy. Except when it doesn't, and the difference between those two outcomes is preparation. When Germany won the 2014 World Cup, the story everyone told was about the goals and the tactics. The story nobody told was about what happened on a training pitch outside Belo Horizonte before the tournament began. Germany's coaching staff, under Joachim Löw, had commissioned a dedicated penalty preparation program 3 years earlier. Every player in the squad was assigned a primary and secondary direction. They practiced under simulated fatigue. Coaches made them sprint before taking kicks, making their bodies replicate the physiological state of a real shootout. They filmed their own run-ups and studied them. By the time the knockout rounds arrived, Germany's penalty takers were not making decisions in the shootout, they had already made them. Brazil, that same tournament, had done none of this, and when the shootout came, you could see it in David Luiz's eyes before he even reached the spot. The searching look, the uncertainty, the calculation happening in real time under conditions that make real-time calculation nearly impossible. Now consider the goalkeeper's side of this equation, because the goalkeeper is in the strangest psychological position of anyone on the pitch. A study by Michael Bar-Ali, published in the Journal of Economic Psychology, analyzed 286 penalty kicks taken in professional leagues around the world. Goalkeepers dove left 49% of the time, right 49% of the time, and stayed in the center 2% of the time. The problem: balls were scored in the center of the goal 29% of the time. The center was the single most effective target, and goalkeepers almost never guarded it. Why? Because of what Bar-Ali called action bias. Standing still when the ball goes past you feels like failure. Diving and missing feels like an attempt. In a culture where the goalkeeper is expected to move, staying in the center feels psychologically wrong, even if it's statistically right. The goalkeeper is not reacting to the ball. The goalkeeper is reacting to the fear of being seen as passive. This is the secret that lives inside every penalty shootout. It's not a battle between foot and glove. It's a battle between two people both trying to override their own psychology at the same moment, under the same unbearable pressure, in front of the same enormous crowd. Cristiano Ronaldo understands this. Watch his penalty run-up closely and you'll notice something most people miss. He pauses, not long, a fraction of a second, but deliberately. That pause is a weapon. It's designed to make the goalkeeper commit early, to force a decision before the kick is taken. Ronaldo has essentially weaponized the goalkeeper's action bias against them. He knows they will move, so he makes the move before he decides where to shoot. Lionel Messi uses a different mechanism. His run-up is almost meditative in its lack of variation, consistent rhythm, consistent posture, minimal telegraphing. Messi removes information from the goalkeeper rather than flooding them with false signals. Two different approaches to the same psychological battlefield, both devastatingly effective. And then there are the players who simply cannot do it, not because they lack skill, because they've never been given a framework for tolerating the moment. Sports psychologist Geir Jordet studied top international penalty takers over a decade and found that players who turned away from the goalkeeper immediately after missing, avoiding eye contact, avoiding responsibility, were statistically more likely to miss their next penalty. The physical act of looking away embedded the failure. Players who held their composure, who faced the miss, recovered faster and performed better in subsequent kicks. The penalty spot doesn't reveal who is good under pressure, it reveals who has learned to be good under pressure. Those are not the same thing. Tonight, somewhere in the world, a youth football coach is telling a group of teenagers that a penalty shootout is a lottery. And somewhere else, a national team's sports psychologist is sitting down with a striker and asking a single question: where will you put it, and how many times have you practiced putting it exactly there under conditions that feel like this? One of those approaches produces Panenka's, the other produces the look on David Luiz's face. The next time the stadium goes quiet and 80,000 people hold their breath, you will know that the real secret was never in the kick. It was in everything that happened before the player ever stepped on it.